Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Kanuk Baek from Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. It's my great honor to moderate this special session. We have a very special speaker this morning. Dr. Birol is the most famous energy specialist in the world. It's very difficult to see him in person, and in particular to have this special session in Asia is not easy to arrange. So I'm hugely honored. Having spent more than 3 decades in energy studies, and then I have met more than 5,000 people who is whose, but he's the most famous and then prominent figure you can remember. So today, what I would like to do during this 50-minute session, I will ask Dr. Birol to give 30 minutes talk, and then I will make just the initial few questions, 2 or 3 questions. Then I will invite a floor to make questions. So we will have a very productive meeting. So I would like to ask our special speaker, Dr. Birol.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and the privilege to be back to Korea. And I understood that these days are very important days in Korea as far as the energy policy is concerned. And it's a great privilege to attend the World Knowledge Forum and to have a wonderful moderator like Mr. Peck, who is also very well known to me and many of you, I'm sure. In the next half an hour, I will try to tell you the global energy markets where we are today: oil, gas, electricity, renewables, climate change, electric cars. These are important to note, ladies and gentlemen. In any country today, if you want to make right energy decisions, you have to understand the global picture. No country is an energy island, especially countries like Korea, which are major energy importers, which have limited amount of domestic resources, need to read the international energy game carefully. So it is the very reason I would like to try to highlight you some of the key dimensions of the global energy system. Now, first of all, where are we today before looking at the next few years? Global energy markets, in many perspectives, changing very rapidly. So therefore, we have to follow it very closely. One important element that I will also elaborate in a moment: North America, US, but also Canada and Mexico, their energy markets are changing very quickly, and North America is becoming an important cornerstone of energy and energy exports worldwide. On the other hand, Asia, China, but more and more India, as well as Southeast Asia, are becoming the driver of global energy demand growth. In terms of fuels, last week I released our annual renewable energy report to international press in London. One of the key findings and perhaps the most surprising one of that report was, in the year 2016, last year, in the entire world, of the all new power plant installations, more than 50% of them were solar power. The rest, everything else put together. Wind plus hydro plus coal plus gas plus oil plus nuclear, less than 50%. And solar alone, a bit higher than 50% alone. Why? Because of the cost, because of the government policies. I will come to that in a moment. And I can tell you that we are entering a solar age, as I will outline in a moment. Another important number, electric cars. Our estimations show that 2017, this year, by the end of this year, we will see about 1 million electric cars in the streets of the world. And China is the main driver here. So these are some dimensions, different dimensions of the current global energy markets, and it is pace of the change, you see. Another important issue, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that digitalization is changing our energy sector, both on the consumption side of energy, but also on the generation side of the energy. It's a huge change, and we are, in 3 weeks of time, going to prepare or publish a report, to my view, the first in the world, how digitalization will change our energy dynamics. I will talk to you a lot, I said quite a bit about the climate change, but there is another environmental problem which is very important and at the same time a driver of the energy policies in emerging countries, namely local pollution in the cities. Many of the clean energy policies pushed strongly in China, India, and other emerging countries are mainly driven by local pollution concerns rather than primarily climate change concerns. And this is a key consideration. Another point which worries me a lot as an energy person is that energy and geopolitics are more and more interlinked. I wish energy remains as a profession, as a sector of the economy, but geopolitics and energy, as I see, are more and more interwoven, as we see almost every day in televisions, read in the newspapers. Now let me move to oil. We have seen that the shale oil in the United States is growing, as IEA has anticipated a few years ago, very strongly. And I can tell you that the current shale oil production in the United States, not the total oil production, but only shale oil production in the United States, in 7 years of time, reached to the level of the production of Iraq today. Iraq, as we know, a very important oil country, several decades of experience of oil production, and the current only shale oil production in the United States is level of Iraq, and we expect in the next 5 years the production growth from United States will be the main determinant of the global oil supply increase. And this is happening, ladies and gentlemen, even at the prices that seemed low to many some years ago. At these prices, around $55, a big chunk of the US shale deposits are profitable projects. Therefore, this brings a completely new dynamics to the global oil market considerations. Some people talk about the oil demand peak, that we will see oil demand peaking soon and declining. We don't subscribe to that. Why some colleagues think oil demand is going to peak? They are saying lots of electric cars coming in the market. This is completely true. As I told you, electric cars are coming very strongly, and they will eat up the cars' oil consumption potential. But why do we say, although we believe that electric cars are going to go strongly, why do we think, as the IEA, oil demand will continue to increase with the current policies? For the following reason. When we look at the next 25 years, where the oil demand growth will come from, we see that the oil demand from electricity generation, from buildings using at home for heating, they are going to decline compared to today. And even the oil used in the cars, gasoline, diesel, we see a downward pressure on that as well as a result of electric cars, hybrid cars, more efficient cars. But oil demand growth is not going to peak because oil demand growth is coming from trucks, from aviation, and from petrochemical industry. These are the drivers of oil demand growth, and it is the very reason we do not believe that oil demand is going to peak sometime soon as a result of the changes in the car manufacturing, in the car industry. Moving to natural gas. When we look at the next 5 years, we see that the huge amount of gas coming to markets from United States, shale gas. About 40% of the global gas production growth coming from United States. Like oil, in the shale gas, huge records. I mentioned to you that the US shale oil production reached in 7 years 1 Iraq oil production, and US shale gas production reaches 2 Qatar. Only shale gas, I am not talking about the total gas of the United States, only shale gas to Qatar today. And this is changing the entire game in the global gas markets. How does it change? In many ways, but most importantly, giving birth to a second revolution, LNG revolution. The first revolution was the shale gas revolution in the United States. And distinguished experts, international experts like Dr. Peck knows very well that in the year 2009, ladies and gentlemen, 8 years ago, IEA was the only institution who said about the shale gas revolution in our World Energy Outlook a silent revolution is taking place in the United States. At that time, it was silent, and now it is very loud. And this silent revolution, which is loud now in natural gas, shale gas, giving birth to LNG revolution, and we are seeing that the substantial amount of LNG coming to the markets and the current gas trade, which is dominated by pipelines, will be dominated by LNG. I will give you one number which I read today in my colleague Mr. Bromhead's notes to me provided. Very, very important. Namely, in the last 3 decades, global LNG industry made a lot of efforts, Qatar, other countries, and we have, as of today, 350 BCM of LNG capacity. 350 BCM as a result of the efforts of several decades. 350. And only in the next 5 years, we will add 160 BCM, half of it, only in the next 5 years. Mainly coming from United States and Australia. This will change the game, at least in 3 ways. Number one, it will put downward pressure on the LNG prices. Number two, it will bring more flexibility to the LNG contracts in terms of final destination clause, in terms of duration of the contracts. And number three, and maybe most importantly for countries like Korea, it will make the hands of the LNG importers very strong. It is time to act for the LNG importing countries, and this is my message to Korea and Korean government. Please make use of this window of opportunity in the developments in the LNG markets. Let me move to renewable energies. What we are experiencing in renewables, ladies and gentlemen, is a big decline in the costs, mainly as a result of the government policies, and the more and more costs are driven or determined by the auctions rather than feed-in tariffs. For example, do you see the cost decline in the wind here? And when you look at the solar, it is even more impressive. Look at this number, ladies and gentlemen. From the year 2014 to today, 2017, in 3 years of time, the average price of solar halved, declined by a factor of 2. Do you know any other commodity in such a small period of time the cost halved? Second, more importantly, we expect between 2017 and 2020, in the next 3 years, there will be another halving of the cost. So, solar is becoming very cheap, and as a result of that, we will see a big dash for solar energy across the world. China being the leader. Today, 6 out of 10 solar PVs are manufactured by the Chinese companies. But there is a huge room for other countries, companies, to take part of this solar revolution, which is now getting very, very strong. When we look at the future, we see that in terms of electricity generation, coal growth is slowing down because of China, which consumes the half of the world's coal, is in a declining phase. Natural gas will grow steadily, and nuclear power, mainly coming from China, grows slowly but surely. But the biggest growth comes from renewables. More than 2/3 of the electricity generation additions in the next 5 years will come from renewable energies. More than 2/3 of the generation coming from renewables, 1/3 from everything else put together. Now, talking about climate change, I know how much Korean government, Korean citizens, Korean industry puts emphasis on climate change. And energy sector, ladies and gentlemen, is at the heart of the climate change issue. Why? Very simple. More than 2/3 of the emissions causing climate change come from the energy sector. Therefore, we have no chance whatsoever to fix our climate problem without fixing our energy sector. And when we say climate change, of course, most important thing is the carbon dioxide emissions. When we look at the history, CO2, carbon dioxide emissions, increased every year, year by year, causing this problem. But, as the IEA analysis show, in the last 3 years, they remain flat. They didn't increase. For the first time, global economy increased more than 3%, a very nice growth. But the global emissions, for the first time, did not increase. It's a very good news. And this is happening because of 3 reasons. Number one, natural gas in the United States replaced coal. Number two, more and more renewable energies became part of the electricity generation. And number three, forgotten many times, but perhaps the most important piece, energy efficiency improvements accelerated significantly. And I will tell you, before going these 3 items, which country was the country where we have seen the biggest reductions of CO2 emissions, the champion of reducing the CO2 emissions? It was the United States. US was at the forefront of reducing CO2 emissions last year, mainly because of the 3 issues I mentioned to you. We looked at the IEA. This is a very interesting thing, that the emissions did not increase. What is the role of different drivers here? This is the emissions we had in 2014, and this is where we are today, flat, no growth. When you look at the pieces of that, economic growth pushed the emissions up, but the changes in the energy mix, more gas replacing coal, more renewables coming into picture, push it down, but also energy efficiency measures push the CO2 emissions down. So these three factors are the reasons that we have a historical result that in the last 3 years, although global economy increased, energy demand increased, emissions remain the same, they did not increase. Our problems in terms of climate change, ladies and gentlemen, is not with energy. The problem is with emissions. So we have to put this in a context. Now, in Paris 2015, we had a historical agreement. And Korea was one of the important countries who signed that agreement. We looked if all the countries who pledged, who make nationally determined contribution pledges in Paris, where will it bring us to? The picture is the following. Even if all those pledges are fulfilled, there will be a slight increase in the emissions, and we will see a world where the global temperature will increase 2.7 degrees Celsius. But what Paris tells us, that the scientists tell us, we can only afford a temperature increase of 2 degrees Celsius. And we looked how we can fill that gap in the most economic way. Two most important policy tools we have in hand, we believe as the International Energy Agency, more efficiency and more renewables. But the other technologies, such as nuclear power, carbon capture and storage, could well be the part of the reduction efforts depending on the government and national circumstances. But two of them are critical for everybody. Efficiency, number one, renewables, number two. We have many fuels, oil, gas, renewables, nuclear, coal, but I always call efficiency as the first fuel. And the second fuel is oil, third is renewables, it continues, but efficiency is the first fuel for us. Now, before finishing my remarks, I wanted to share with you one of the tests we do for our governments. Our governments in the world pushing the clean energy technologies. And what we do is that we look at the pace of the progress of clean energy technologies and compare them with the targets they set. Which technologies are on track, which are going well, which are not going well. And we look at 38 different clean energy key technologies. I can tell you that only 3 of them are progressing in line with the government targets. Just give you a couple of examples. Which are not in target. For example, buildings. Buildings use a lot of energy for heating, for cooling, for lighting, and other things. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, today, 2 out of 3 buildings built in the world, constructed in Asia, in Europe, Latin America, and elsewhere, 2 out of 3 buildings, they have no efficiency standards building codes. They are built without any standards and norms, and once a building is built, it is with you 70, 80 years, normally on average. And they have no efficiency standards. Lots of waste of energy. Carbon capture and storage, a critical technology, but not a lot of appetite yet. Such a pity. Some technologies which are in the middle, such as nuclear power, In some countries we see they want to reduce the share of nuclear power, but in others, for example, in China, there is a push for nuclear power. Lighting. LED lighting is going everywhere in the world. India is a very strong supporter, but in some parts of the world, we are still using the traditional lighting devices, which gives a picture which is not very, very promising. Where are the technologies which are going very well? 3 areas: solar PV and wind, especially onshore wind; energy storage, which is critical. Lots of good news we hear. And also, as I mentioned, electric cars, booming. So to sum up, it is very difficult to say that the clean energy technology progress is in line with the government targets set. And I believe the very reason is the lack of support for clean energy research and development. This year, IEA made a heroic work. Look at the entire world, governments and companies, how much money they spend for clean energy research and development. I can tell you, results are depressing. First of all, we have not seen any increase in the clean energy R&D. It is a peanuts, about 37 billion US dollars. And if you want to put in a context to see how small it is, the R&D budget of the 3 top IT companies for their R&D budget, put them together, is more than entire world's R&D budget for clean energy technologies, to show you how small it is. Another depressing point, at least for me, I thought, looking at the interviews of the private companies and how much they push the clean energy technologies, I thought private sector is the driver of the clean energy R&D. But this is not true. The big part of the clean energy R&D is coming from the public sector. The contribution of private sector is very limited. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me finish my presentation by telling you that we, as the International Energy Agency, we think we are an energy security organization. Oil security is still very important. We see the world today, what is happening in Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, Iran, and so on. Still very important, but with the growing share of gas in the markets, especially LNG, with the long sea lanes, we think gas security is also important, and we are working on that as well. Oil markets have new dynamics, most important one being the shale oil, which can come and go in the picture very quickly. This will provide a completely new challenge for the traditional oil producers, as well as it gives us the message that the oil markets will be more and more volatile in the next years to come. A big wave of LNG is coming to markets in the next 5 years. This will reshape the natural gas dynamics and the dynamics of the geopolitics of natural gas as well. But it will have implications also, gas pricing and how the contracts are formalized. Renewable energies, costs are coming down. This is excellent news. We will see the share of renewables growing in the electricity generation. But the challenge will be how to integrate the variable renewables, such as solar and wind, in the most secure, most economic way to our electricity systems. It is the reason we have a new work stream at the IEA, which is called System Integration of Renewables, which we did recently. Finally, limiting the temperature increase to maximum of 2 degrees, as we agreed, countries agreed in Paris, will require major transformation of energy sector. And it will require huge efforts, energy transition, like the countries, like the Korea. But my suggestion to all the governments, including the Korean government, is it is a very legitimate policy to give a fresh look at the energy policies. My great support for that. And it is at the same time very important that we reconcile 3 important objectives, namely environmental sustainability, energy security, and the competitiveness of our economy. And International Energy Agency is at the disposal of the Korean government as well as other governments to support them in this energy transition process. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Birol, your wonderful speech. This audience of this special session, they would have a very clear picture on global energy trend, and then where we are standing at, where we are heading for. Now, before inviting, I'm sure that a number of people have burning questions, but before inviting the questions, I would like to abuse my status as a moderator to ask us just a specific question. In particular, Dr. Birol, you have in your final closing remarks that 3 important determinants of this energy sector is energy security and environmental sustainability, and then competitiveness of economy. But I think the most important thing is that how to balance all of that. That's the most difficult part. Actually, you have mentioned that now your message to South Korea leaders and then planners, how to balance the policy direction. It's very difficult. It's never easy. But now, this new administration of Moon Jae-in government, now they are moving away from conventionally coal and then nuclear-based energy policy to more radically to renewable energy and natural gas. It's a very drastic move, and then a lot of people are worried that what sort of a price burden it will be. Now, one of the specific questions during your speech, and you have highlighted the revolution, the role of a revolution of U.S. shale gas. Now, this shale gas revolution importance has been highlighted in Korean media quite several times and then quite widely, but never mentioned in Korea that the role of gas flow from Russia. So because now this new government is also paying attention about this northern policy, which had been initially addressed, but for the time being it was subdued, but now it is rekindling their focus. Now, what is, I mean, for example, a few months ago, U.S. Parliament was extending the sanctions against Russia, and then a lot of people in European countries, they were very worried about this one. It's not really energy matters only. It's really geopolitics. So in a sense, this energy issue, natural gas export, is being used for energy power politics. But I personally believe the most important thing for Asian consumers is that gas price Dr. Birol has highlighted, because of gas revolution, this more gas will come from, but around the middle of next decade. Now, these IOC players, they are talking about whether another second round of final investment decision has to be made to slow down this supply volume. That's a very important factor. But in that aspect, the role of Russia can play a very important role. So I would like to ask your view on the role of Russia, whether they can play a big role in parallel with the US shale revolution.
Thank you very much. First of all, you mentioned the new energy policy discussions in Korea with the new government. Once again, it is very legitimate. Every new government in Europe, in the United States, in other countries, come with new policies. It can be energy, it can be economy, it can be labor market or others. Now, perhaps I wanted to, before going to your very good question on Russia, I want to highlight two issues in this new energy policy debate in South Korea. Number one, when I look at the Korean numbers, energy numbers, which I did very carefully, the share of coal in the Korean energy mix, in my view, is rather high, on the high side. When we look at the IEA countries' average, we have members, US, Canada, all Europe, Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. When I look at the average of them, it is 15–16% in the total energy mix share of coal. In Korea, it is double. So I think it is important to look at it, how we can have a share of coal which is lower than today, especially looking at the power plants which are less efficient and coming to end of their retirement times. This is one thing I would like to bring on the table. Number two, as I understand, during my discussions with the government officials, the new government policy also looks at the growing role of LNG and growing role of renewables. I think it is an excellent timing because of the international conditions. LNG prices, gas prices, in the next several years, we see a lot of LNG in the markets, so that it will be on the rather low side. It's an excellent time to make the most out of the LNG. And here, I mean not only as an importer, but perhaps Korea may think of making more use of LNG booming business in different ways. The Korean industry business is very strong. So therefore, some other considerations may come in the picture. But as for the Korean domestic energy use, lower LNG prices makes the hand of the government stronger. Second, again, as I see, the new government policy will be pushing renewable energies. And here, as I showed, the cost of solar is plummeting, going down substantially. This is an excellent, again, window of opportunity for the new government policies, because renewable will be pushed in a context where the costs are down. In Germany, for example, several years ago, German government was very keen to see higher share of renewables in electricity generation. But at that time, the cost of renewables were 3 times higher than today. So the government had to put a lot of money from its pocket. So therefore, from a government point of view, it is a very fortunate window of opportunity for Korea that both the LNG markets and the renewable energy sector is in a favorable position vis-à-vis the government new energy policies. Moving to Russia, Of course, I don't know, nobody can know how much, if any, new Russian volumes will come to Korea. But not even 1 BCM would come. The very fact that there will be a lot of American, Australian LNG floating in the markets would put a pressure on the Russians and the others in terms of the prices they offer and the contracts they put on the table. So in Europe, for example, Europe is the main client of Russia. The very fact, and you know very well working in Oxford University, the very fact that there is a possibility of the US shale gas coming to Europe pushed the Gazprom having different negotiations of the gas contracts with their clients in Europe, put the prices down. Many countries in Europe benefited from the fact that US shale oil may come if the Gazprom keeps the prices high. So therefore, it will help Korea, even Korea gets gas from the United States. The very fact that Australian US gas coming to markets will make the hands of the Korean or Japanese or other gas importers stronger.
Thank you so much. As the next question, I'm not going to ask about this Korea's nuclear policy. I'm sure that a question will come from the floor. So my specific question, second question is to Dr. Birol is, I understand that IEA has made a big effort to work on this China, to advise Chinese government. Now, my concern is that there is a real addiction, not only China, but also India, their addiction on coal use, and then their own projection to 2040 and 50, the role of coal is just still very high. So what is your main findings of research, in particular this year, and then what's your recommendation to those coal main consumers?
It's another very good question, and you are right. We worked on China and India a lot. So first of all, I should say that I became the head of the IEA 2 years ago, and our member countries were US, Canada, Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. But when you look at the trends of energy, as you do, biggest growth is coming from China and India. So I came up with a strategy which we call opening the doors of the IEA to emerging countries, especially in Asia. And in 2 years of time, we have now China, India, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, and Morocco became associate members of the IEA. And so therefore, IEA family is much bigger now compared to 2 years ago. And we can engage with those countries much stronger, and we have institutional legal ties with those countries. And when I look at China and coal today, it is very important, because China consumes half of the world's coal alone. But in the last 2 years, Chinese coal consumption is declining. And we believe we might have seen the peak of Chinese coal. It is going to go down. It is, ladies and gentlemen, not mainly because of climate change. It is mainly because of the local pollution in China to address that. It's going to go down. And we are working much more closely now with China, even those coal power plants which are operating, so that they are operating with the maximum efficiency and with the necessary filters and scrubbers are equipped. We are working on that. Now, coal industry, who saw that the Chinese coal consumption is in a decline, had an important second hope, India. Would India compensate the decline in coal? There was a lot of hope on that, because in India there is another major problem, which is about 200 million people have no access to electricity. Okay. And India has own domestic coal resources. We expect coal will grow in India, but less than we thought a few years ago, because solar energy is becoming competitive to coal in many parts of India. And since it is distributed energy in many cases, Indian government pushing the solar very strongly, and we will see both solar and coal coming instead of only coal many of us thought a few years ago. So this is the reason solar is becoming competitive, a real competitor to coal in India. But I can tell you that even the coal plants built in India today, they have the highest efficiency standards compared to some even other Western countries. So coal growth will continue globally, but much more slower than in the past, and the growth will come from a bit from India, but mainly from Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and other countries.
Now I would like to invite questions from the floor, because we have a limited time. Just I will just pick up just 2 or 3 questions from the floor. Please introduce who you are and then your affiliation. Is there any question? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Inbel Jo. I'm a graduate student of environmental studies in Seoul National University. I have a question about your thoughts on the nuclear power. As moderator Peck said, how in Korea we have a very fierce argument right now on whether to continue the construction of 2 nuclear reactors, and that it's now open to public debate. And we just finished the public debate yesterday, and then result will come out on Thursday. And then the proponents of the who argues the continue on the reactor construction, they argue their main argument is that the technology that Korea have on nuclear power could be a great asset and will be a great asset for Korea, because we can export that technology. So I want to listen to your point of view. What do you think about their arguments, how the technology, nuclear power technology is prospering? And then what do you think about the outlook of the nuclear technology as a national asset?
It's now your turn to answer this difficult question.
You anticipated already this question. So I can tell you, we, International Energy Agency, we have the same arm length to all the fuels. We don't favor this one over that one. Our criteria is how to make the best national energy policy, putting a balanced approach for all the fuel mix so that we can realize these 3 objectives: environmental sustainability, energy security, and the competitiveness of the economy. So from that angle, first of all, internationally, I was recently in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. I heard from the minister himself how much he was pleased with the Korean nuclear technology and Korean colleagues, that they are working perfectly on time and on budget. It's one issue. Separate from that, what will happen in the country itself will be the decision of the government and the Korean people. I can neither say don't go for it or go for it. But what I can say, if there is a new policy on nuclear power, it has to be designed in a smart way so that it doesn't have unintended consequences. Korea can use nuclear power, renewable energies, especially solar, natural gas, and other technologies. But the important thing is to make these decisions in a comprehensive and in a well-thought way, and to make the best market design so that it doesn't have any implications on the energy security, electricity bills, and the environment. But as I told you, we are entering an age, a time in the energy markets where you will have a lot of cheap LNG and the low-cost renewable energies, including solar power. So I will be discussing today further with my colleagues, government officials of the Korean government, to make my detailed suggestions to them in terms of the energy policy. But once again, it is important to have a balanced approach and to have a right market design and clear signals to the investors in the energy sector.
Thank you so much. The last question I would like to invite, if there is no question. Yes, one more. Each a final question. Please introduce yourself and then your affiliation.
유익한 말씀 감사합니다. 저는 발전회사에서 근무하는 이은홍이라고 합니다. 제가 드리고 싶은 질문은 첫 번째 질문에 대한 후속 질문 성격입니다. 한국에서의 그 원자력 발전에 대한 그 선생님의 박사님의 말씀을 잘 들었고요. 그렇다면 향후 전 세계적으로 원자력 발전의 그 앞으로의 그 전망이 어떤지 그에 대한 박사님의 의견을 듣고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
His main question is what's your view on this global nuclear policy in the coming years and decades?
Today, when we look at globally, close to 60 nuclear power plants are under construction, and half of them are in China. The other half in India, Russia, some European countries. The nuclear power can generate electricity in an uninterrupted way without carbon dioxide emissions, but it is facing two major challenges. One, to build a new nuclear power plant, you have to find the financing. Second, there is a public acceptance challenge in many countries. Countries like China pushing it very strongly, and if other countries are not in the picture, I may well see that China not only builds nuclear power plants at home, but may well be a leading nuclear energy technology exporter. This is the trend I see, and today the share of nuclear power plant is about 11% in the global energy mix. We expect with the current policies it will be more or less in line with this share in the next years to come.
Thank you so much for your kind answer, and due to the limited time, now we have to close this session. Thank you so much, Dr. Birol. I would like to express our deep thanks for your wonderful speech and then a proper answer on